I'd like to welcome everyone to the June 13th, 2024 Wildlife Board meeting today. This meeting is being held in person at the Eccles Wildlife Education Center in Farmington, as well as being streamed live on YouTube. This public forum allows you to express your opinions and proposals on wildlife management in our state. This board considers your ideas, opinions, and feedback before making decisions on proposals before us today. The Wildlife Board is charged with setting wildlife policy for our state. Wildlife management is complex and sometimes it's emotionally charged. We all have ideas and opinions about what is best for Utah's wildlife. It's why we're here today, and that is a good thing. We encourage those who want to express their opinions at today's meeting to fill out a comment card. The comment cards are on the table in the back between the doors. We expect those in attendance to respect the people who speak, especially those who hold views that don't align with their own. Respectful behavior helps facilitate efficient meetings where board members can listen, digest, and address concerns, ideas, and proposals being presented for consideration. Disrespectful behavior, including booing, yelling, cheering, laughing while someone is speaking. You can also help maintain a respectful space by referring to people by name instead of descriptors of their physical characteristics, demeanor, or gender. If this behavior occurs, the board chair will remind attendees to be respectful. If the behavior continues, the applicable individual or individuals will be asked to leave. Lastly, please help reduce distractions during the meeting by putting your phone on silent. And if you need to take a call, we ask that you please step outside. We'll start by introducing our board members. We'll start on the end down here with Brett.
Brett Selman, Northern Region.
Gary Nelson, Central Region.
Randy Dirth from the Southeast region. I'm sorry, the Northeast region.
Paula Richmond, Southern Region.
Kent Johnson, Southeast Region.
And we'll excuse Bryce Thurgood. He's was going to try to get on the call today. Couldn't be here in person. Hopefully he can attend us a little bit later, but we'll excuse him for now. We'll first look at the talk about the agenda. Do we have any modifications to the agenda? If not, I'll call for a motion for that.
I'll make a motion. We accept the agenda.
I'll second.
We have a motion by Gary, seconded by Paula to accept the agenda. We'll ask that you just raise your hand for this particular one. Those in favor, raise your hand. And I thank you. That's approved. Before we do the minutes, I apologize. I forgot to do a RAC chairs again, so we're going to go to that right now. So let's start with this end down here with you, Brad, this time, and introduce yourself and where you're from.
Brad Buchanan, Northern Region.
Mike Christensen, Central Region.
Where is Oline, Northeastern Region.
Kevin Bunnell, I'm the regional supervisor in the Southern Region, sitting in for Austin Atkinson.
Thank you, Kevin. And do we have anybody from the Southeast region? Eric,
Yeah,
I'm
I'm
sorry,
on the
Eric,
line.
please introduce yourself too.
I'm Eric Luke. I apologize. I couldn't be there in person today. I'm representing the Southeast region.
We're glad you're on with us today, Eric. Thank you. All right, let's talk about the minutes. Did everybody have a chance to review the minutes? And is there any additions or changes, modifications to those minutes of May 2nd? If not, I'll call for a motion to approve them.
I move we approve the minutes from, what was it, May 2nd?
Do we have
I'll second it.
we have a motion and a second. Motion made by Brett, second by Kent to approve the motions or the minutes for May 2nd. Those in favor, let's do a hand raise on this one also. It's approved. Thank you. All right, turn time to Gary for some of the action log.
Okay, we've got a couple of things on the action log and some of them will move off today. We've got, there was the motion we asked the division to look in guides and outfitters obtaining special use permits on WMAs and look at implementing a fee for non-consumptive users. And we've got Eric Edgley here today to speak to that.
Thanks, Gary.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Eric Edgley. I'm the Habitat Section Chief for the division. And I've been asked to provide an update about WMA use fees and waterfowl guides and outfitters. So on the first subject on WMA use fees, in some preliminary focus group work that we've done, we've found that there are a lot of challenges associated with implementing fees for non-consumptive users on our WMAs. Focus groups have also discussed the need for additional data on how members of the public are utilizing our WMAs, as well as for commercial activities. Our lands team that's in our habitat section is working on a survey to gain a sense from the community of how they utilize WMAs for a variety of non-consumptive and commercial activities. This team will develop a report based on this survey and other findings to address both commercial uses and challenges of managing non-consumptive users on our WMAs. So this report and associated recommendations we'll plan to present those to the board sometime later this year, late 2024 is our plan. Just another note about this, there have been previously discussions in the legislature where there was initially some support for WMA use fees for non-consumptive users, but then it was heavily opposed by counties. And so those discussions ended at that point from a legislative standpoint. On the second subject, waterfowl guides and outfitters. Currently, licensed waterfowl guides and outfitters are required to obtain a special use permit from the division to do guiding on any of our waterfowl management areas. In 2021, we issued 2 permits for guiding. There were no applications received in 2022, and 1 application was received and then subsequently canceled by the applicant in 2023. The application period for 2024 is open currently and must be received by August 25th, 2024. And we have so far not received any applications to date for guiding on our waterfowl management areas. So that's what I have to report. If there's any questions, we're happy to take those.
Eric, I know when we were talking about this originally, there was some of the guides and outfitters had permanent blinds set up on the WMAs. Was there any discussion at all about that?
Not that I recall. I think that's something that we still don't allow. And I don't recall that there was any additional discussion on that subject.
And I also, with the non-consumptive users, I know that was a hard pill to swallow for them because the ones that talked to me said, well, it's public land, yes, administered by the division, but they feel like I know that was going to be a hard sell, but it'd be nice to have them pay a little bit just like everybody else does, but.
I agree. I think we're still supportive of maybe looking at that in the future, but we'll have to get that other legislative and county support before we can move forward with anything.
All right. Anything from you guys?
I have a question or two.
Yeah.
With regard to guides and outfitters, if you put together something where it's a permit for just across the board for guides and outfitters on all the WMAs, what would that look like where you have some, like I'll use specifically the Book Cliffs WMA. It's not one contiguous piece of land. It's just checkerboarded around and there's no defined boundaries. You got to, I mean, if you download on X or Go Hunt or something, you can get fairly close and know where you're at. But what would that look like and how would you go about doing that where, and I guess the same question would apply to non-consumptive users that they may be just crossing over, maybe they're fishing one of the creeks up there and they're fishing for 20 minutes and they're on the WMA and then they walk downstream a ways and they're not anymore.
So back to your first question, I think if an outfitter wanted to guide on more than one property, we can include that in a single permit, even if it was spread out. And so I don't see that there would be a problem with that. On your second question, anybody who has a hunting license or a fishing license, I mean, they're contributing. And so they would have basically any sort of public use would be at their disposal on any of our WMAs, even if they only fish for 20 minutes. So I don't know if that answered your question.
Well, actually, I asked that wrong. I threw in fishing because I was thinking about it a little bit ago.
Mhm.
But just like hikers and backpackers that go in there and they may want to camp and they
Yeah.
end up camping the night where they stay is on the WMA. But they're not using the WMA exclusively because it's
Right.
just pieces of property here
Right.
and there.
Right. So, I mean, that occurs. And I think what we're looking to curb is any large areas where people will congregate and make a large campsite that creates problems for us. If there's occasional use, I don't think we're really opposed to that on most of our properties. On some of the bigger Wasatch Front properties, that could become an issue. There are some properties that we don't allow overnight camping on because of previous issues that law enforcement had to be involved in. But most of our properties basically are open to occasional users coming across, the different parcels to camp or fish or do any of those activities. But their primary purpose is for wildlife use and wildlife related recreation.
So when they do get a permit, is it like a state parks permit where you buy the permit and then you can do any of the state parks, or would it be geographic specific?
No, typically a special use permit will be specific to certain WMAs.
Okay.
That's how it's currently set up for guides.
So if you implement this, would a person, non-consumptive guide, outfitter, whatever, that needs it, someone that needs the permit, you've determined they need the permit, would they be able to do, just like Gary said, purchase a
Yeah,
permit to access, and it's good on all the WMA
Yeah.
statewide?
Yeah, if we were to implement something that was general to the public, an access permit of some kind, it would cover all of our WMAs. What I would sense that would turn out to be. That would be our goal.
Anything else from the board? Thank you, Eric.
Thank you.
We have one other motion, and that was the CWMU recommendation, and that will come before the board today. So have no further action log items.
Thank you, Gary. Okay. We'll turn the time over to Director Shirley for a division update.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning, everyone. It's great to be here, especially in this place. I was able to come out here earlier in the week. We're lucky to have a facility like this. If you want to see all the teal species in North America, you can see them probably from our parking lot. So I saw them all earlier in the week. Not many places in the world you can do that. So, well, not many places in North America you can do that. So anyway, I just want to start the update today by saying it is officially summer. It has got hot in the state. Our field season really starts kicking off in April, May timeframe, and we are full bore into a lot of different projects. Employees are frantically working really hard. The division has changed, especially over my career, in that I don't think our employees get much of a downtime anymore. It seems project to project all year long, and it's a testament to their dedication and the support that we have. And there's always a lot of great things going on. So whenever I give these updates, I think this is just the tip of the iceberg. So anyway, looks like I've got the slide thing. So I'll start with our admin services section. The antlerless application is open and it ends on June 19th, and the results will be turned around in about 2 weeks. We'll also have the application for sage grouse, sandhill crane, sharptails, and swan open from July 3rd to the 17th, and our general season elk permits go on sale. You'll remember the changes that were implemented there, and we've done it 1 year, so we didn't really have any major issues last year and aren't expecting any this year, and have worked hard to make that be the case. With our aquatic section, fish management has really changed and continues to change across the state, and Utah has really leaned all in. You can see here we're talking about tiger, muskie, walleye, and wiper, a bunch of things that we've had a lot of great success on. You can see there on the tiger muskie that we stocked about 120,000 tiger muskie into Utah this spring. We have also given fish and eggs to Idaho, Oregon, Arizona, to get their tiger muskie programs up where they want them. It's a real testament to the work that's being done there. On the walleye front, you can see 2.5 million fertile walleye into Willard Bay, hundreds of thousands of other sterile walleye into. You can see the results of the other places that we put them. But again, these are fish that are big and mean, and people like to catch them, and it's really diversified what anglers can do out there. And then you can see on the wiper front, our Springville hatchery is spawning striped bass, and we put 14,000 fish into Willard Bay and are spawning again this week. So Waweep hatchery has almost 500,000 fry that are ready to be stocked in the near future. So really great work there. And I wanted to share this. This is something we've brought up numerous times, but we were able to do a groundbreaking ceremony a couple weeks ago down in Loa for the fish hatchery, and it had great legislative support. You can see the dollar figure there that was appropriated to DWR to build this hatchery, and we're super excited about it. It was a necessary rebuild to happen for our aquatic section to move forward in the state for the next long term. We think that we're in a really good place, and you can see the amount of pounds of fish that we will produce, and with the new technology, it'll be almost double where we were there in the past, and it's almost a third of the fish that we produce will be produced at the Loa Fish Hatchery. So that's incredible, and we're about 3 years away from this being into production. And also we've contracted with local engineers and in Wayne County to do work for us. It's been from our perspective, a real success there as well, and it'll bring some local jobs to the community there. And we had great support again from the legislature, county commissioners, and many of our NGO partners were helping us beat this drum of the need for this fish hatchery. And we're just grateful that we were able to get it through, and the respect and trust that the division will do well by that money. So a really good step forward, and we'll keep you updated. I might be stuck. Oh, there we go. Our law enforcement section. This is mainly an AIS slide to give some updates on our aquatic invasive species enforcement over Memorial Day weekend. Is really the kickoff to the boating season. Very big. If you can remember, there's been a lot of changes to the AIS certification program. Some of those were changes that had to be made. Your registration for AIS used to be included in your boat registration, and that is now a separate fee. It doesn't cost anyone anymore. It's just been pulled out of their boat registration. That wasn't because DWR wanted to do that. That was because we had to do that. So we've had one season with that, and we're in our second season, but there's still a lot of questions revolving around that, and it's still a really big push, and always will be in our state, and really in the West and across the nation. This is something that is very focused on water quality and conservation of water. So you can see there that over that weekend, and we had a lot of hours spent on aquatic invasive species regulations, but we still had about 160 violations over the weekend. We have made it so that the stickers are available for purchase at our offices. It's probably not your easiest route, and we've tried to make sure the public knows those can be purchased at that website, STD of the Sea, and purchased online, but they can get them at our offices if need be. Habitat section, looking forward to fiscal year 2025. Again, we throw out a lot of numbers with our habitat section as far as WRI projects that have been funded, because it's very impressive what Utah is doing. And $41 million in projects were funded through federal and state agencies, conservation groups, and partners. That's 199 projects that were either fully funded or partially funded, and about 200,000 acres of wildlife habitat will be worked on in FY25. That's meeting our goals, and we're trying to keep that program doing the amazing work that it does. And you can see when we have amazing water years, the great benefit that is as well. And we're still finishing up projects as well from this last fiscal year. Our outreach section, the YHEC Youth Hunter Education Challenge, is this weekend at Cache Valley Public Shooting Range. That's for kind of a upgraded course from hunter education for kids that want to be involved. Great program, and Utah's been heavily involved there. We also have our Lee K Public Shooting Range open house this Saturday, where you can do some things for free and or at a discounted rate. Great to get out and do those things this time of year. Our wildlife section, wanted to start with some birds and bats and just all the non-game work that is going on around the state. I don't think it doesn't get forgotten at all from a division standpoint, but sometimes I think it gets a little bit put on the back burner as far as the amazing work that really is instrumental in all wildlife management moving forward, is taking care of our native species. So the picture of the bat there, you can see white nose syndrome. We haven't found it in Utah, but we've got it closer and closer. It's in Wyoming, it's in Idaho. And then the other part on our native species that I want to mention is just the Fish and Wildlife Service is reviewing a lot of species that have the potential to either be listed or have been candidate species. And that includes, it just seems to be growing and growing. And they're looking at Wilson's phalarope, pinyon jay, little brown bat, hoary bat, pygmy rabbit. I think that there will be a big push for some of those species. And so as an agency, we have the opportunity to do as much work as we can on the front end of those to prevent those listings from happening. And so we're all in on that. We have our fawn and calving studies that are going on, and they're in full swing, and we want people to be involved with us. And those are great projects to see the work that's being done on the ground and the partners that are involved. I have some of the numbers from that so far as of Monday, and starting to catch more and more fawns, and starting to have more and more calls of people that are also finding fawns under their trees this time of year and what to do with that. So the division always puts out messaging there, but tons of work going on there, tons of great research that we're learning about. And then you can see the prairie dog picture there. Counts are up. We're excited about that, and making goals towards recovery and hoping for some change in status there. With that, I always like to watch a movie if we can, highlighting one of the division's programs and or employees section. And it will be about a 4-minute video and on our law enforcement section and the great work that they do. And it's really a testament to our partners and everyone that's out in the field of knowing how to report violations and being educated on what those could be. And so I asked them to have this ready for us. Thanks, Mike.
So poaching is a major problem in the state of Utah, and we need the public's help. Whenever I use that word poaching, most people always say, what is poaching? what is that exactly? And I always tell them it's just theft, but when people think of it, they think of somebody driving down the road and shooting a big buck. But that's not always the case. It could be an over-limit of fish, taking too many turkeys. It could be different things like that. And so we really educate the public on that, and hopefully they'll contact us when they see those things.
In the state of Utah, over the last 3 years, we've had more than 3,600 animals illegally taken to a value of over $1.7 million. Of the 3,600 animals illegally taken each year, more than a third of those are fish. Those violations include things like over limits, slot limits, or people fishing without licenses. Over the last 3 years in the state of Utah, we've had more than 400 elk illegally harvested, totaling more than $700,000, of which 70 were trophy elk, valuing more than $500,000. We've also seen more than 500 deer illegally harvested, 70 of which were trophies. Total value of those deer are more than $700,000, with those trophies accounting for about $500,000. As a conservation officer, our patrol efforts focus on license checks, ensuring compliance through public contacts. We do a lot of investigative work, as well as hunter education opportunities with those that we meet.
As a conservation officer, something that I'm passionate about is educating. It's my job to educate the public, especially our youth, on hunting and hunting regulations. Hunter education is a big part of my job, and I love going to the classes to talk to those, whether they're youth or older generations that are just getting into hunting. Conservation officers across the state have increased patrols in a variety of methods, including the use of canines, drones, and cameras to assist in locating violators. Even with our various tools, the public is our #1 resource in preventing wildlife crime. In the state of Utah, the average conservation officer's area is 2,500 square miles. We rely heavily on the public to report violations to us.
In the state of Utah, we offer the public many ways to contact law enforcement and report violations. We have a Tip 401 program that's an app you can download on your phone. We also have the UTIP, which is a hotline that you can contact us and get an officer directly, closest officer in the area.
UTIP is the Utah Turn and Poacher Hotline. You can call this number 1-800-662-DEER. When you call this number, you'll be connected to an officer, and we're going to ask you about the violation that you're seeing. If we receive a tip that leads to a successful investigation, oftentimes we can reward that individual with monetary or a reward permit.
Although I'm a conservation officer, I'm also a sportsman, and it's frustrating to see when wildlife is illegally harvested. And for those of us who put in for tags year after year, we want those opportunities to harvest those animals legally, and it's frustrating for everybody involved to see those types of things happen.
So our biologists do a lot of work to calculate how many animals we have, and then how many tags we can offer the public. And then when people take things illegally, it's really hard to manage how many we are going to lose. We can't anticipate how much poaching we're going to have.
Unfortunately, in the state of Utah, poaching continues to be an issue. We look at that as theft of a resource, theft of an opportunity for both sportsmen, hunters, and just the general public. And poaching interferes with wildlife management, as we can't account for all of the animals that are illegally harvested each year.
Just be a good witness. If you see something, say something. If you can get a license plate number, get a vehicle description, know where you're at, GPS locations. These are things that'll really help us.
Utah is a beautiful state with a lot of wildlife opportunity. Being a conservation officer allows us to enjoy the privilege of protecting the Utah resource. We're always looking for new officers, people who are passionate about wildlife, passionate about protecting wildlife. If that's you, give us a call. Be smart, hunt safe, stay legal.
Thank you, Mike. Thanks for having that ready. I think that's just another part of what we're involved in every day. Our officers are normal people, just like all the rest of our employees are, that care about the resource and are passionate about it. And we're lucky to be in a place where we have great public support for those programs and trying to do good things for wildlife. So that's my update.
Thank you, Director Shirley. Great update. There's a lot of great things going on in our fish and wildlife right now, and it's fun to get out there and see the people. They're great people work for the division. Next, we'll go to item number 5, our legislative update. We'll ask Kyle Maynard to come up and Charles Lyons. Thank you. Give us an update on what's going on in the legislature.
Thanks. Charles Lyons with the Attorney General's office, just filling in for Kyle Maynard because he is expecting a baby girl any minute now. So that we wish him and Rebecca best of luck with that. That's more important than we're doing here right now. Real quick, before I get into this, I just wanted to mention last week I had the opportunity to attend WAFWA for the first time. And it was a great experience. I had a great opportunity to meet some other folks from other states, but also had a great time connecting with some of the people here within the division. Great place, great opportunity to do that. And just watching the law enforcement video, piggybacking on that, there's a legal committee that meets at WAFWA every year. And one of the presentations and things that we discussed is Oregon has a state wildlife prosecutor, goes and handles all the prosecution in all the counties throughout the state. Gave a really in-depth, detailed description of the work they did to prosecute a really nasty poaching ring out there last year. So great things that our law enforcement does. Other states are doing things too. And it's really great to see all the stuff that those folks are doing. This is not necessarily a legislative update as much as it is, these are the required rule changes that came from this past year's legislation. Riley gave a update at the April work session on what all those things were. And so this is just pretty brief, touching upon what some of those cleanup items might be in our rules. So in the packet, it mentions there's changes that were needed to be made to R657.5, the big game rule, the dedicated hunter program, and then fees, exchanges, surrenders, refunds, reallocation of wildlife documents. HB 382 clarified that if a duplicate license, permit, tag, or certificate of registration were to be issued for whatever reason, lost or destroyed, that if that should magically reappear at a later date, that would be invalid and the person would not be able to use that. The only one that stays valid is that duplicate that was issued later. The other one in here for taking fish and crawfish is a simple correction to a citation related to permanent residency. And then the big game depredation rule, the changes there are just referencing the new statutory changes that apply to new municipalities and restrictions to if the municipality enacts an ordinance restricting the use of firearms within there, that they're tasked with handling those wildlife claims, wildlife damages and nuisance claims. So the rule just simply references the statute and there's really nothing more that needed to be added in rule. So you just look to the statute, that's the law that rules the day. With that, this is a really brief update because those are just some, mundane changes to rule. That's really all I have for you. If you have any questions on that language or anything in those red lines that were in the packet, happy to help that. Or if there's programmatic questions, I can ask someone from the division to maybe answer those questions for you.
Any questions for Charles? Thank you, Charles. Appreciate that. And Kyle, I hope you're not listening today, but we are glad you're where you are. You need to be with your family today. We'll jump on to item number 6, our Cougar update. It's another informational item. I will ask Darren if he'll come up and give us an update on our Cougars.
Thank you. Happy to be here. We've kind of been over this a couple of times recently, and so I think maybe what I'll do is just touch on a couple of take homes and then answer any questions the board may have. I think some of the probably the biggest take home from what we're looking at with mountain lions, all the data taken together, it does appear that we've seen a steady decline in our overall densities since about 2016. We've seen those numbers coming down. In terms of what's really interesting is if you compare the population trend of mountain lions to our mule deer population, we're actually in the last couple of years starting to see a divergence. And again, that's by design. We have had some concerns with high mortality to mountain lions on some of our units, and we've managed over the last 4 or 5 years to try and lower lion densities and benefit mule deer. That seems to be happening. Another interesting thing, if you look at the trends of deer populations and mountain lion populations, beginning in 2004, the relative difference between the numbers of deer and the numbers of lion were greater through the early and late 2000s and 2010s. Those numbers got closer. So in other words, there are more lions per deer, and we're starting to see that come apart again too. So again, our management objectives are to make sure that prey base is not overly utilized by predators, but at the same time, we do still have lions, and we do still manage for lions on the landscape. So with that being said, I think I'd be happy to take any questions about this.
Any questions for Darren? Not seeing any, Darren, but thank you for going to all the RAC meetings. I know that was a big deal to go to all those, but each one I watched, either in person or afterwards, I picked up something else on the questions that were asked during those too. So thank you for doing that.
I guess on this, it's informational, so we don't have a lot of discussion, right? So sorry, Darren, I might make you come back up. So in the Southern RAC, they brought up a question about being able to sell the green pelts for cougars. So I just wanted to kind of talk about that a little bit. And is that something that we can look into?
Yeah, for sure. Currently, you can sell a cougar pelt. It has to be tanned. And we have had some of our trappers and hunters ask, if they could sell those green like they do other fur bearers. And I don't see anything in rule or statute or federal rule that would prevent that. So that's certainly something we could look at if the board is interested in. I don't know what it might encourage some additional harvest if you can sell it before you have to pay to have it tanned. And that might benefit us on some units where we've got some concerns with deer. But we have to wait and see how that all shakes out.
Would there be any interest of putting that maybe on the action log to look at in the future to make that a rule change?
Yeah, we'd be happy to look into that in more detail and bring it. The next time we'll talk mountain lions would be next year at this time. And I'll be back with bear stuff in the winter. So however the board would prefer to have us bring something back, we're happy to look into that and get some more details.
Darren, can you sell green bear hides?
No.
So bear and lion have to be tanned
Right.
to sell.
Okay. Do I do a motion to put it on the log? Or do I just ask for it?
If you'd like to, that'd be a good time.
Hey, yeah, I'd like to request that we put that on the action log. I'm okay to talk about it next year for the next cougar. I don't know if we want to include bear for the next one as well. Is that something you have interest in there, Brett?
Yeah, I think they're hand in hand. If we could put that on the action log for bear and lion, if that's appropriate.
Yeah, I think the biggest, we'd want to talk the law and do all those things, but we could bring something back. I don't foresee an issue. It's really just whether it's tanned or not seems to be the difference. So if the board wanted to change that, we could.
I think other states surrounding us can sell green pelts.
Some can. I can't remember off the top of my head which states, but we can look into that. And again, I think we'd still want to require them to be sealed so that we knew they were legally taken, and that could be identified through the process. And again, we see every animal that's legally taken, and so I don't foresee any big concerns changing that regulation. And I can, if the board wants me to bring something with the bear, I can certainly do that as well. In RACs are in December, board will be January.
So Stacy, it sounds like we got a motion on the table for to add to the action log to look at having green pelts sold for both bear and cougar. Does that cover the motion, Paula?
Yes.
Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
We got a motion by Paula, second by Brett. So we'll start, Brett, on your end. Let's go around with a yay or nay on it. Vote.
Yes.
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 Motion passes. Thank you, Darren. And Paula, thank you for bringing that up. Okay, we'll move to item number 7, our CWMU, I'm sorry. Oh, I'm sorry. We need to do the online comments on that, so we'll turn the time to Director Shirley for that.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Agenda item number 6 on the Cougar update. We did have 3 online comments that either all strongly agreed or somewhat agreed with the division's proposals with a 4.67 weighted average. The 3 comments summarize that we have too many predators, mountain lions, and coyotes need to be reduced. Support of continued trapping of cougars, and second one of supporting trapping of cougars in very remote areas. That's it.
Thank you. And do we have any comment cards? No comment cards. Alrighty. Thank you. Now we'll move on to item number 7, CWMU rule amendments. Ask Chad to come up, and anything you want to talk to us about before we get started?
Nothing really new. We started this process, started meeting as a rule committee about almost a year ago. And it was a lot of meetings and a lot of discussion, a lot of compromise. And yeah, feel good with the recommendations that we made, and happy to discuss any of those recommendations.
Any questions for Chad on this one? Questions from rack chairs? Not seeing any. Well, do we, we'll summarize the electronic comments.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. Agenda item 7, CWMU rule amendments. We had 24 submissions. I gave you all a copy of our breakdown of what that looks like, so you can follow along here if you'd like. But 16 of those comments strongly or somewhat agreed with the division's proposals, and 8 comments strongly or somewhat disagreed. Some of the main themes in there, again, the 24 submissions, 12 of those were somewhat supportive of our recommendation, where 6 really weren't, and 11 were really supportive of the CWMU program. Some of the themes inside that revolving around CWMU should not be given private antlerless elk permits. 100% of those antler elk permits should be given to the public. That we had 4 comments regarding that. Hunt planner, the divisions needs to keep hunt planner up to date. We had comments, and we heard that a lot through the RAC process. There was a comment about the public being given more time at this meeting because it's such a big issue. 2 comments regarding the change in the guest policy and support for that. So a comment on support of the trade lands, and then a couple comments that were not supportive of the trade lands portion. A comment on DWR not being consistent by state code by allowing CWMUs with less acreage to participate, and that we should be catering, that we are catering to the CWMUs and not to the general population. Again, some overall comments on the one on bonus points and people that purchase a CWMU tag, losing those, and season dates on CWMUs aligning with regular season dates. And that's really the bulk of the comments there.
Ready, thank you. We'll go to some comments by the audience. We have some. We'll ask you to come up one at a time, and we'll give you 3 minutes to state your comment. Please come to this mic right over here, and we'll start with Tom Land, and afterwards we'll have Braden Shepherd.
Well, I promised Bryce I'd keep this brief, but since he's not here, let's get these out. So I'm Tom Land. I'm the operator of the Deseret CWMU. I was on the rules committee with Randy and these guys. And it was a good committee. We had a lot of good discussions. One of the things I wanted to bring up, there's the recommendations we support totally, except for two. And we'd like you to reconsider or look at putting some sidebars on a couple of these recommendations. One is the guest policy. Right now, by state law, we're required to give, one guest with the CWMU honor. A lot of us CWMUs already give a truckload, let a truckload come. If they've only got a few, I've got pretty close to 500 state hunters a year on our CWMU. We start letting them all bring a Suburban full of guests. It's setting us up for some issues that we already deal with two guests. I can just imagine having all these others. So we'd like you to look at, either sticking to the state law or, compromising a little bit and saying, hey, a couple of guests with a hunter is plenty to pack out an elk, a moose, a deer, and think about it that way. It just puts a lot of issues on the larger CWMUs when we start allowing that many guests throughout the season. I look at it with our cow elk hunts is we do an unguided cow elk hunt, and there's opportunity to have 310 cow hunters there in one day. You put that many people on the landscape. I know we're saying within visual or verbal communication. I think there needs to be a little bit more stricter rules on that, because they can say, he's 3 ridges over. I can see him in my binoculars. And they're giving hand signals and stuff. I think it's just going to set up to where you're going to be interfering with other people trying to hunt too. I would like to see it say, you can bring however many guests you guys decide, but they need to stay within 100 feet of that hunter. If they're there to help pack out, if that's the reason this was passed through, stay with the hunter, stay in very close proximity, not where I can yell to him or give him a hand signal from 2 ridges away. And the other thing I'm going to let Braden talk about a little bit more is the 4-wheelers, rangers, horses, that type of stuff. Adds a lot of liability. On our ranch, our owners require us, if we're going to use, and we mainly just use UTVs, and they're 90% used for just packing out animals. We have to have some huge liability insurances on them. They all have to be completely street legal. They all have to be completely fully insured. And we have to have a $2 million rider above that. And I know, talking to Colby and Chad, the state does cover if we're unguided, but knowing the owners of this CWMU and knowing that, hey, I can go after it. And we have had a few policies over the years, or sent at us when we've had a little incident. They're going to come after the owners. And so we'd like to see you say, hey, if you're going to do this, it has to be exactly what the ranch requires of its private employees or private hunters. Has to be the exact same thing with the public. Other than that, thanks for your time.
Thank you, Tom. Brandon, and then afterwards, Michael Labrum.
You guys need the podium here. I'm like, I have this talk written. No. Kobe made me promise that I first get up and remind you guys that I'm on the Central Region RAC. So this is not the RAC's position or where the RAC came from. I'm here on behalf of one of who I work for, the landowner farmland reserve. So Deseret Land and Livestock is one of 3 of our CWMUs that we have. 2 of our CWMUs are really small, and we have antelope hunts and a few deer hunts, and this rule change doesn't really impact those small CWMUs. They're like, we don't care either way. But for Deseret Land and Livestock, we've got, as Tom mentioned, we'll have 500 plus hunters on the property, just licensed hunters, plus guests. And so we started doing the math going, it's very likely that during a cow hunt, you bring 5 or 6 hunters in your truck, you're going to have 12, 1,500 hunters just during a cow hunt, right, on the property. So as a landowner, that makes us nervous to have that many people on the property, hiking around. I mentioned to Gary, there's concerns of humans using the bathroom on the farm. Our CEO was like, do they go to the bathroom at the lodge when they're there? I'm like, no. And he's like, oh, that's terrible. That's gross. So that many more people on the property just makes us a little nervous as a landowner. And so as Tom mentioned, I think as Farmland Reserve, we'd be comfortable saying 2 guests, at least 2 guests and the hunter, just give some flexibility there. And maybe it's once again, one size fits all is not always the best. When I worked for the state of Utah, I was always pushing back against one size fits all, right? So I think the two guests and a hunter, that's still some flexibility. People can do whatever they need. If they want to add a truckload or a van full, that's okay. On the insurance, as Tom mentioned, that's as a landowner, I said, hey, Tom, we know the state says, hey, we'll cover you if something happens. But imagine the news story if some kid or, girl rolls a side-by-side or kid rolls a side-by-side on our ranch. It's just going to not be the best PR and also just not a good thing to deal with. And even if you guys will cover us, the state will cover the ranch, there's still going to be a lawsuit. There's still, as an attorney, right, I'm always thinking they can sue, and Farmland Reserve is an affiliate to the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And so we're a nonprofit, but our funds support the cause of the LDS Church. And so because of that, there is this concern that you get a bunch of people on side-by-sides and four-wheelers on our ranch and something happens, there's a target, there's just, it's not going to be the best thing. So if we're going to allow that, we need some flexibility that says the landowner may also require additional insurance and safety as part of that. So that's our two main requests. Once again, Farmland Reserve, not the position of the RAC, so Mike can represent us as a RAC. So thank you.
Thank you. Michael Abram and then Dave Price.
I appreciate it. I know you guys know who I am. I've been in front of the board a few times over the last couple of years. So we're here asking the board to put a pause on the variance change that's being requested. I know that for those of you that know us, we have a CWMU on the Kimberly Mountain that's below the 10,000 acre specification for the current rule. What's being recommended is that that they're keeping a variance in there, but it's not really a variance. They're just basically, this new rule is drawing a hard line at 9,000 acres, and if you're below 9, you don't even get a shot at it. It's kind of a like Brain said, it's a one shoe fits all. Our idea or the idea of the committee was to, let's just draw a line at 9,000 acres, and anybody under that, doesn't even matter. Doesn't even matter if you're overrun with elk. If you can provide the best hunt in the state, you don't even get a shot. And I just don't think that's, common sense wise, that doesn't seem like a way to fix. Well, I don't believe that there's a problem, to be honest. I teach Chad all the time, because when he does his presentation, he says, well, we get like one variance request a year. And I thought, man, that doesn't seem like very many. So I kind of joked with him. I don't know what the problem is we're fixing here by taking away the variance rule and drawing a hard line at 9,000 acres. When they drafted this rule, when they put the 10,000 acres in quite a while ago, they also drafted in the variance process, because when they wrote that rule, they knew, hey, we're probably going to have some ranches under 10,000 acres that would make great hunting units, great elk units, and they would provide awesome hunts and opportunity for the public, partnership with Fish and Game. So let's put the 10,000 acre rule in there, specification, but let's give a variance. So it isn't a one shoe fits all, that there is properties in this state that are, that the quality of the acreage is much more important than the quantity of what you have. I mean, I stood up in front of you, RAC in November, and gave you statistics of, I mean, there's CWMUs that have 60, 80,000 acres and their elk success is 50%. But it's like, you got enough, throw some elk tags at them, let them go hunt elk. We don't, it's 50%, But then you have ranches that have 6,200 acres in this state, and they have 100% success every year. And how is that bad? I guess I don't see, the Wildlife Board didn't actually even recommend that the variance process be looked into. I understand when the committee looked, they said, what should we change? But the variance wasn't even a recommendation to be changed. It's somebody in the meeting or however it went, looked at it, and I'm about out of time. But one other concern I had, and I'll just put this on the record, I think, we're from Southern Utah, and the CWMUs in Southern Utah have much different concerns than the CWMUs in Northern Utah. We're not stacked on each other with property and people all together. And so I was a little concerned that the representation of Southern Utah and our hunting units and CWMUs was almost non-existent on this rules committee. everybody was from Northern Utah. And so I'm a little concerned that our kind of concerns weren't represented on this rules committee as well. So anyway, I would ask that you kind of table the variance change this year and go with the rule that's been in place ever since that it was put into place, almost 30 years ago. So anyway, that's my request, is to just leave the variance change off of the new rule. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Dave.
Dave Friess. I'm the current president of the CWMU Association. And I was on the committee with many of you others. And it was, we had a lot of vibrant discussion, to say the least, on how this should go. But I want to take it back a little bit. I've been involved probably almost since the inception of the CWMU program. And I often tell a story about one of my uncles and how he felt about fish and game and wildlife on our private ranches 30, 40 years ago, before this program. And I think we need to remember why the program was established. And it was established to give landowners an opportunity to make money on wildlife so they would become a vested partner with the state in managing wildlife populations. And it has been an unbelievable success in that way. My uncle, who hated the DWR, hated wildlife, now loves the DWR, loves wildlife. And I think that's a change you've seen across the board. And I think it measures the success of the program. So congratulations to those 4 founders that founded the program and had the foresight to see that. That being said, it's a very thin line that we have to run between the private sector and private landowners and the public's interest on private land. And you've heard me say it 100 times. If we get too far one way or the other, the program will fail and we'll end up with something none of us want. Because I think it will push towards privatization of wildlife and not the Western model that we all know and love. So that, giving you that background, the committee, it was a pretty hard committee. There was 2 sides. There was the side that were pro CWMU and there was the side that was pro public hunters and the public's interest. And I felt like neither side got what they wanted. And probably because of that, it was, is what was meant to happen. But there are issues. You've heard them from Tom and Braden and Michael, actually, that, things that are not perfect, things that, one size does not fit all. And they're things that we should really look at and consider. But that being said, as the CWMU Association, we are good with the division's recommendations as they sit. But I will measure that by saying the issues that these guys bring up are valid and they do matter and they do have different, there's different situations and needs on every ranch and every CWMU. One size does not all fit all. So anyway, I think it went pretty well, all being said, the committee did. And like I said, nobody got all that they wanted. Right, Randy? So
Yeah,
that's all I will say. Thank you.
You've said that very, very well. Thank you, Dave. Because there was the kind of 2 sides in the entire group, and it was a negotiated, and the things that were talked about today were negotiated. I mean, there wasn't any of those things that were thought about lightly, because it was a kind of a negotiated process, and some had to give. Well, actually, everybody had to give one way or the other in something. And so with that, let's go to that was our last comment. So let's go to our RAC chairs and let them report on their motions and their votes. So we'll start with you, Brad.
The Northern Region, we had a motion to accept the rule amendments as presented. That passed unanimously.
The Central Region had two motions. The first was to accept the CWMU rule amendments, except for the cow elk management strategies when a unit is over objective, and that passed 6-1. And then the second motion was for the DWR to explore the option to first give access to antlerless permits to the public hunters and then look at other strategies as needed. And that passed 8-1. And the one opposed just thought that that was a little bit too vague. They wanted to see something a little bit more specific. And we did have a couple RAC members join during the discussion, and that's why there's a difference in voting numbers.
The Northeastern region made a motion to accept it as presented. There was some concern with the 90-10 split and with some of the mapping with some of the CWMUs and whatnot on that as well. That was some of the concerns they brought up.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The Southern region passed a motion to accept the CWMU rule amendment as passed, but remove the 90% acreage requirement in order to request a variance.
Thank you, Kevin. And Eric.
Southeastern RAC had quite a bit of good discussion on this motion, but when it was all said and done, the RAC unanimously voted to approve the division's recommendations as presented.
Thank you, Eric. So just kind of summarize, we've had 3 passed it unanimous as presented. 1 that passed unanimous with the exception of the 90% acreage requirement in order to request a variance. And then 1 that passed it all but unanimous, 6-1. And then 1 to give another motion to give the antlerless permits to public hunters and look for other strategies instead of allowing the CWMUs to have any. I think I covered that. Okay, take it back. Chad, we'll give you some time. Is there anything that you want to mention from what you heard today from the comments, that any clarifications that you think need to be made?
No, I think, as you said, all these things were discussed in the committee. So we talked about everything that was in this rule at length. So that's it.
Is there anything that right now prohibits the, like for Tom's, one of his concerns is the insurance on ATVs or UTVs. Is there anything in in this rule that stops them from requiring it of folks that bring those onto that would stop any CWMU from requiring that on their property to show proof of insurance before they are unloaded?
Yeah, they should be able to do that. And that is our intent with that, is just that it's treated the same for private and public. So whatever they're going to ask of the public, if they're doing it with their private guys, that's mostly what we want to see, is just an equity there.
Okay. And maybe just, I know one of these other issue I think that I heard was the number of guest policy. I know this was talked about pretty extensively in the committee, but, and I think we narrowed it down to if you're non-guided, you can have however many can legally sit in your vehicle. So if you've got a Mini Cooper, you've only got a couple of seats, you're going to have that. If you've got a Suburban that has, I don't know, 6 or 9, maybe 9 seats in one, I don't know. You could have 9. And that's kind of where the committee landed. Is that correct? And that's.
Yeah, yep, that's where we landed on it.
And then I guess the other concern that I heard, another one I heard was where how many that they had to be, that these guests had to be within visual and verbal communication. And that verbal communication doesn't include radios, right? That's just what I can communicate.
Right, yeah. And that language I just took from, I think, the mentor rule. That's what it says for that. So just to be consistent among our rules, this is why it was written that way.
To me, the way I read this, a CWMU operator should not be required or to allow somebody sitting on a whole different ridge that you can look and give hand signals to. That doesn't meet this rule, right?
Right.
And if it's not hand signal communication, it's verbal communication. So I guess if you're going to talk too loud, you're going to spook whatever game's going to be there anyway. Isn't that where the committee kind of landed on this? So
Yeah. And I would say that I've talked about this a little bit in different meetings, I think in that committee meeting, is we want to be committed to, like, we have a really good complaint process for the public if they have any issues with a CWMU. I want CWMUs to know that we're there to back them too. If the public are breaking any of these rules, that they can end their hunt until it's resolved with the division. We're there to back them on the enforcement of their rules on their ranch, because I know I've talked to CWMUs in the past that have reported, like, hey, our guest policy, we told them they could take one vehicle full of people, and they ended up with 3 vehicles up here. And they generally just let that roll and don't make too big of a fuss about it. But I just want them to know, like, if there are issues, that it goes both ways, that we want to make sure the public has a really good hunt, and we want to make sure that their rules are being followed up there.
And one thing this new rule is requiring them to have all their ranch rules updated annually by a certain date. I think it's in there by a
March
certain
1st.
date, so that anytime they want to modify, change their rules, they got to have it in there before the application period. Is that
Yeah.
correct?
Yeah. It was March 1st.
Other questions?
Yes, when we were talking like variances, and they made the 90% rule, originally you had to have all of it. And on the rare occasions, we'd give a variance. Right? And then people started getting creative about trade lands and a bunch of different kinds of stuff to make it all work. How did you arrive at the 90%? I agree with that they ought to be pretty close, or a variance isn't considered it. I know there's some areas that are little sweet spots that are way under, but how did you rise at the 90%? I mean, I
think it's exactly what you said, we just discussed, and it felt like there's got to be somewhere where you got to be somewhat close to that acreage. And just as a committee, as we discussed it, we just arrived at 90%. I mean, the way the rule currently is written is if you had 2,000 acres, you could come and ask for a variance. So, and like Michael said, we get some of these requests. I feel like I get at least one every year. And not to trivialize it, but each one of those requests takes a decent amount of time. So when you're talking about, it goes to the biologist, and then it goes to the CWMU advisory committee, and then it goes through all the racks, and then the board. Like it's a significant amount of time just spent on each variance request. And so to us, it made sense to make it so it at least had to be close to that acreage. And then we try not to be subjective. So that's the other part that we wanted to do, is that this is an objective way to look at it. So we're not picking winners of losers. Somebody else with 7,500 acres, we don't tell no. And then we tell somebody with less, yes. So it makes it uniform. Everybody knows what it is. It's, if you're at 90%, you give an extra tag to the public, and you can be an elk CWMU.
Thank you.
Yeah, just talk about that a little bit. Brock McMillan was on our committee, and he's the professor for Brigham Young University, studying wildlife, and he brought something to my attention on that, which I didn't realize. He had done some studying and found out that the studies have shown that it takes, I think, a 16 square mile area to hold elk, that once you push them, they'll run around that kind of 16 square miles. Is that's what it was, like 4 miles by 4 miles, I think is what he said. And that equates to right at 10,000 acres. So I think that, and so I felt comfortable on the committee once I heard that 10,000 acres was probably a pretty good one to go to. So then, I mean, I was trying to figure out where that 10,000 acres came from, but he had done some studying, and I think years ago, that's kind of where they landed. It takes about 16 square miles.
So with these guys' concerns on proximity issues with hunters, do we need a little more regulation, or do you feel like the dedicate or the mentor hunter rule would actually take care of all that? It seems to me like it would.
Yeah, I think it could. And if it makes people feel more comfortable, I mean, that's why we landed where we landed. But yeah, we don't want people all over the mountain. We want them to stay close by. I guess if you feel like there's a better way to make it so that they stay nearby, then we can adopt that. But yeah, hopefully that answers it.
Any other questions for Chad? Well, we'll bring it to board discussion.
Just one thing, Chad, with the antlerless tags, where you have the option, if you need antlerless harvest and you haven't achieved it yet, late season, just giving tags to the operator to let them just shoot elk. Is there going to be oversight when that happens?
What do you mean by oversight? Like
making sure that we get the right number of elk killed and making sure that they get recovered properly as well.
Yeah, it would be them harvesting or finding people that they know that can respond right away to go harvest. So everything would be legal. We could come back and report that in the springtime when we do antlerless recs of which CWMUs did that and how many were harvested and what was done.
That was my second question, is if you were going to put together anything to record that and present it back to the board, I would actually like to see that and see what we're doing with that and how far it goes.
Yeah, we can do that part of our spring antlerless CWMU recommendations.
Okay. I don't think we need a motion to that effect or anything, do we? We can just ask the division to do it. Okay.
Yeah, I don't think we need a motion. I think we can just, if Chad says he'll do it, he'll do it. If not, we'll ask him to do it again. Thanks, Chad. All right, come to the board for discussion on this agenda item.
I do feel like with the number of people, we should probably put a number to that instead of a vehicle. Because our vehicles can fit 15 people, and I don't think that was quite the intent of the wording on that. So if we can, I feel like a hunter with 4, that fills a truck. 1 in the front, 3 in the back of extra people besides the hunter, but that's just my personal opinion.
That's actually a good thought. As they were, talking about this as the discussion went, I was thinking of the rule sounds good. So everybody that can be legally in a vehicle, that's everybody's got a seatbelt, but somebody at some point is going to buy an old school bus and sharpshoot that. And so I think Paul is right. We probably ought to cap it at a certain number of individuals that can be with the hunter, whatever that looks like. And I'm comfortable with 4 or 5 personally.
There's a few exceptions. I'm not sure. I know I have 5 boys, right? And so if one of us drew, they're not a problem. And the proximity thing would cover a crowd, so to speak. But I want to leave it a little bit open so that, you know, I would, maybe you could have the operator's permission. I don't mind putting a number on it, but unless otherwise, how would you say it? Not necessarily permission, but I know even like the rule change that they have to do every year, you're supposed to read through and contact the CWMU before you even put in. So you know, you're aware of what the rules are. But I wouldn't, you know.
I do feel like it would be good to maybe have a number established, knowing that they can contact a CWMU and it sounds like a lot of them allow more than, you know, allow a fair amount of people. If it's 5 sons and a hunter, I bet if you called them, they would probably be okay with it. I'm not sure how to put that in rule, but it'd be good to have at least a number to start with, and then knowing that they can still contact the CWMU and probably get exception on some of those.
Because I've talked to a few operators over the year, and before most of them had the hunter and a guest. And so I'd call them ahead of time, said, hey, if this by chance happens and their mom draws a moose tag, it's going to be hard to keep the boys home, you know? And so I just, and so as long as we have a provision so that we can make a guideline suggestion of a number, but most of them, I think, given the situation, could make an allowance. We would call it a variance, wouldn't we? Isn't that the word we use now? It's an exception.
Yeah,
Could be worded. Sorry, go ahead, Randy.
I'm just thinking in my mind, if I am a hunter, my family's a hunting family. We're all in the same vehicle. We have to be in the same vehicle. And that's, so if you stop and get out, you're still all in the same area. I would hope that nobody would show up with 8 or 10 or you know, a bunch of people. I mean, I'm not going to do that because I'm there to try to find the game, not scare them away. But I think I have empathy for Tom. He's, you know, for what he does over there. I mean, he's a premier CWMU. I mean, and you can't have people, you know, 8 or 10 guys showing up with each hunter. That just, he's got to do, you know, in his case, he does, you know, this is an issue. And for probably 90% or more of them CWMUs, it's probably not a big deal. But I mean, it's almost like if you hand out so many tags, you might have to draw a number or something. I don't know, but I'm comfortable with 4. I mean, I guess my gut, I'm comfortable with saying, you know, have to allow a vehicle with maybe up to 4, and beyond that, it's up to the operator. I don't know how you do it.
I think that might be where we need to go with this. We put a cap, but up to a certain number, I'm good with 4, and say, you know, but if you have needs or a special situation, you know, operators, obviously they're allowed to do whatever they want. It's their property. They can allow more if they want to. And I think most of them are probably going to be pretty flexible, you know, like myself, I have 5 children too. So, and a bunch of grandkids now, but obviously, you know, I think I can see like Tom's concern is if somebody does draw a really rare and coveted tag, and any of them on the CWMUs or our limited entry, both are rare and coveted tags, you get a lot of friends. I've seen it on a lot of our units hunting, you know, where there's one guy holding a tag and there's 12 to 15 in the camp. So, and I can see their concern with that, and it's legitimate.
Brett, you've got an opinion because you're an operator. Tell us your opinion.
Well, I've been there, and you get more than 2 other people. How are you going to, if it's a spot and stock situation, my goodness, it just got way hard to get everybody on the hunt that, on the part of the hunt they want to be on. You know, to me, 2 other people is oodles. But again, if the operator says, yeah, bring whoever you want, then that's fine. But I think 3 is oodles.
And that's because of the noise issue, right? Because of
Yeah, and
the movement and the noise that the animals,
Yeah.
you know, I mean, most hunters, I think, are going to feel that way. I do. I think most hunters are going to feel that way, that, you know, we're going to bring as few as we can because, you know, we are hunting big game.
But you know, I'm okay with, you know, 4 or whatever, but to me, I kind of think it's a problem that kind of solves itself most of the time.
Yeah, and I don't know, I didn't need to make it sound like we had a platoon that was going to be stalking in on an animal, because usually you got whoever's got the shooter and then somebody that's just for eyes with them. But I mean, I don't have a problem with putting a number on it, but I don't want to close the door in case there's some different situation that an operator's okay with. You know, desert land and livestock is, you could probably spread out 1,000 hunters and they'd never even see each other in a day. It's pretty good size. I mean, so it's not like they're a little line of caterpillars following each other around, you know. I'm fine. I'm good with putting a number on it. You know, I wasn't on the committee. I just got reports from it occasionally, and I know everybody compromised. So I know this was one that the landowners had to compromise on to make this whole thing go. And so I'm sure there's some that the public hunters they compromised on too. So I don't know. I don't want to modify it too much, but I'm great and okay with putting a number on it, you know, as long as there's a possibility for flex. So.
And I'm assuming we're going to break out a few of these items, right? So we'll probably vote on maybe people now, talk about ATVs later, vote on that, variants, vote on that. Does that sound appropriate?
Yeah, let's just stick with the guest policy right now and hit them in a minute. But is there any, if we want to change the guest policy, let's create a motion, you know, just for that.
I'd make a motion that we change the wording to say hunter plus 4, so 5 total. And with discretion, or I got to reword it. So with the CWMU has opportunity to allow more if desired.
So let me see if the motion is to, as far as the guests, they can have up to 4 guests. The 100 plus 4 guests. And what else did you say? It was good.
That CWMU has the right to allow more if they desire.
Thanks. Yeah, that's a minimum required. Do we have a second on that? Gary seconded that. Paula had the motion, Gary seconded that. Okay, we'll call for a vote. We'll start down with you, Kent.
Yes.
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 I believe I'll recuse myself from all the votes on this action item.
Okay, thank you. All right, that passes. All right, let's jump in with the ATV, UTV insurance. Guess it goes on the horses or whatever they have there too. Let's talk about that. Is there any? I guess if they can require it themselves, if they require it of their people, and they require it of the hunters that come there, I would think they should be able to require. You know, there shouldn't be anything in there that stop that. So let's talk about that. Is there anything we feel we need to do for that issue?
The way that was, at least to my memory, the way it was read in rule or for the new rule is that whatever they're doing, that the hunters would be allowed to do. So if on their property, they have to be street legal, whatever, then the hunters would have that same regulation or restriction. So I think it's kind of covered in the rule.
I'd agree with that. I do feel like if the rule is intended that both sides has to follow, if they put restrictions on their private, they should put restrictions on the public. If they allow certain things for private, they should allow it for the public. So as long as it's equal across the board, then the rule probably does cover that.
Okay. The third thing I wrote down was the requirement for minimum acreage for CWMU. Right now, it's limited at 90%. So you'd have to have 4,500 acres to be a deer CWMU or a pronghorn turkey, or 9,000 minimum to apply for a variance for elk or moose. Do we want to discuss that one at all?
I'm pretty comfortable with the division's recommendation on that. I think Chad put it the best. It makes it objective instead of subjective, which is kind of what we want with as much as we can do with the things we do as a board. We want everything to be as objective as possible. And then the public and the private CWMUs, everybody, then there's trust. Okay, they can trust the system. Like if you have something that's always subjective and it's fluid, you have a living set of rules, as it were, nobody trusts it.
I think there were points made that not everything one size fits all. One thing that probably on my side of it, twice the Southern RAC has voted to allow this to happen or to let under 10,000. So twice my RAC has voted in support of this. So I feel like I need to also support the Southern region on that.
Okay.
So the CWM rule, right? Isn't it 10,000 acres? And then if they're under 10,000 and still above 9, the way the Snoop would go, they could apply for a variance if they have good enough reasons, right? So 10,000 is what the elk limit is with a variance on 1,000. So I'm comfortable with that.
I think the only difference is there's just no variance. So either they're 90,000 or 9,000, they make it. If not, they don't. So it just gets rid of the variance on the way it's proposed.
I want to make any motions on this one.
I don't want to make a motion because I'm going to recuse myself anyway, but I have to, man, I struggle with this because I live this nightmare of less than, we have to have a neighbor in order to do elk. If we don't have a neighbor, we don't get to do elk. And we've always worked that out with the neighbor, but man, if I didn't have a neighbor, I'd still want to do elk, and we don't have enough. But we have elk there all the time. They never leave. And I agree with they need more space than deer. I agree with all that, but I guess my reason if I was going to vote, I would vote with Paula because it's a can of worms because I get what. I'm glad I'm not voting on this.
Let me ask you this, Brett. Do you work things out a little bit differently with that neighbor because you want?
Absolutely.
You do. And so,
absolutely. I have to get along, and I don't want to all the time.
I think that's what happens here. You need to, in order to have that big of an area, because not, you got to you got to work things out a little bit better with folks in order to do it. And I think we find that with, 90% of our CWMUs, they get along with each other because of that particular thing. And I think that's probably a reason to.
Now you sound like my mother, but.
Well, I'll take that as a compliment. Thank you.
But while I got the mic, I actually know Dave's uncles, and I have to mirror what he said about this program with my own uncle and father and family. This CWMU thing is an absolute win. It breeds so much more tolerance for wildlife into these private ranches than there ever used to be. 30 years ago. I remember my dad and uncle trying to figure out how to get rid of the deer. If we didn't have any deer, we wouldn't have any deer hunters. And then we wouldn't have to put up with this trespass. Fences cut and gates smashed and roads ruined and all of the nightmare things that we had to put up with all the trespassers. And so it breeds tolerance, and it makes the public that utilize the ranches way more respectful of the land than they used to be, even with an increase in population. So it is, I would sign, if it was, the money part is, everybody likes money, right? But we didn't sign up for either of our CWMUs for the money. We signed up for control of the public. That was our big reason to sign up. And that's basically, we get money too. That's fine. But the reason we're in there is to control the public. And this controls the public. It's awesome. That's my 2 cents.
Thank you, Brett. It's an awesome program. I totally agree with you. This has created so much tolerance for wildlife in this state, and I think it is a premier program for the entire West. So we see that. All right. Any other discussion on the percent of acreage necessary for a variance? If not, I'll entertain make a motion on this one?
There's one more thing that I wanted to point out on these people in we limit it to whatever we limit that to, that number. They still need to stay close to the hunter.
Yeah.
Do we have to add that in somehow?
It states right now that they have to be in visual and verbal contact with them at all times.
But do we need like a number of feet or something that they have to be within?
Again, this was discussed pretty heavily in the committee, but we could.
I agree with Brett on that. I think maybe we ought to have something there that spells that out. But is it okay if we finish the acreage thing and then go back to that?
I'm not going to vote anyway. I'm just here for
Okay,
the
but
ride.
yeah, I think we ought to discuss that at least and make sure and include Chad in that. Brett brings up a good point.
Okay.
Okay, thanks.
Just part of the acreage too. So regionally, private and public land is very different. So yeah, in the north, there's a lot more private than we have in portions of the south, which would eliminate potential CWMUs because they just don't have the option. No matter what they do, they can't fill the acreage requirements. And even if there's no neighbor they can talk to, right? So
their neighbor is public ground.
their neighbor is public, right? So for me, it's an opportunity to create some additional hunts that the public can enjoy. I do feel like they should have, a more public heavy split, maybe not heavy, but at least a more generous split than, I would say when they start out, it might be a 1-to-1 type thing. So something that we need to look at there too.
So you're saying in properties where they're completely surrounded or landlocked by public land, so there's no possibility of getting bigger, then we would consider a variance, but the split would be different? Is that?
Yeah, or just something that allows those that don't have any other option, an avenue. You know, they want to be a good public partner, but they can't, you know. There are some places like that that are just limited with private opportunities.
Does a Kimberly fit that description?
I believe it does, Mike. Am I correct? Yeah.
I don't know. I worried just by not having a cap somewhere that every Tom, Dick, and Harry is going to want to do it. And I realize there's special conditions that make some unique, but that does open a floodgate for stuff. And that's not enough of a reason to never do it. But if we had some good regulations on it, like how big would it need to be? 80,000? I mean, the people that are under, I know some of the ones I know back in the day when I was on the committee, some of the people that were trying to get variances were like a way under, you know, and so it wasn't just a variance. It's like without all these variances, you couldn't even think about it, you know, and and it does need to be a pretty good sized block of land, but, you know, completely surrounded by public, you know, if they get bothered very much on a small piece, they're just going to move on to public. So I don't know.
I just thought of something. If you got a piece of property that is a CWMU and it's a deer CWMU or a pronghorn CWMU, but not an elk CWMU, that doesn't disqualify that property from having the owners charge trespass to go in there to hunt elk or moose. They can still charge trespass to do that. They just are not, you know, and to me, I think that was the ones that might fit that kind of realm would be, charge trespass in order to, I think I'd rather do that than have to take hunters up there. But anyway, just a thought. I think it doesn't eliminate them, stop them, because it's not an elk CWMU. They're still can hunt elk during the elk hunting season, because that's still part of that particular unit, whatever the unit rules are. Am I correct, Chad? Yeah. So that just a thought.
Looking for a motion, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, if we want to make a motion on this one, let's make a motion.
Okay, I'll go ahead and make a motion that we accept the division's recommendation on the 90% on variances for CWMUs.
Okay, we've got a motion on that. Do I hear a second?
I'll second it.
Second by Gary. I guess we'll start at this other end. Brett, you're going to recuse yourself?
Yes, I'm going to recuse.
Okay, Gary?
Yes.
No, just for purposes previously stated.
Yeah.
Yes.
All right, that motion passes. Okay, it sounds like we want to jump back to the guest policy and how close they need to be within the hunter.
I'd like to have it, and you can probably tell me better, Brett. You're an operator, but I'll take a stab at it. What if we make sure in there spelled out they have to be within visual and non-projected verbal range? That means just conversational speaking, no megaphone, no anything to amplify your voice to be able to talk to them. So, that kind of covers it. If you can see them, and then that pretty much keeps them within 100 feet. That sound about right, Brett?
Well, I think that'd help. I think the old rule said something about you could use radios.
Yeah, this one, they got to be in visual and verbal communication is
No,
what, is
not
what it says.
radios.
Not, you can't use radios.
Yeah, well, that's gotta help. I mean, I hate to put, we gotta take a measuring tape. I hate that, but
That is tough because then you've got, if you leave, if say there's four of you and you leave two in the truck and two of you go in to make the stock and the possible shot, now you're not, you got to all stay together, I guess. So if you put so anyway, to me, this is kind of an issue we're trying to make an issue out of because I don't think people are going to want to do it.
yeah, I agree with that. But like was mentioned before, somebody 2 ridges over making hand signals, then that's not going to work either. So
Yeah, that wouldn't meet the rule requirements because they got to be verbal communication.
yeah,
I do feel like how Chad had it in the rule where they have to be in verbal. That kind of takes care of most issues there. And I do like staying consistent to the mentor program as well, because if we have something similar, we should try to model that.
I agree. I think the proximity thing is taken care of within the rule. And even on four-wheelers and stuff, if people get in there with ATVs, they still have to, it's not like they can spread to the four corners and find whatever. They still have to stick together. So the proximity covers all of those kind of issues, I think. And nobody's going to, like, say, if you make 50 feet, then if you did happen to bring 5 people in addition to the 100, then they'd have to sneak in, be a platoon sneak, not a hunting sneak, So I don't want to belabor it with more specifics. I think the rule as it is good.
Sounds like we're all in agreement on that one. Any other issues with the CWMU rule that we want to address?
I feel like just in comments and stuff throughout the RAC process, there was just some concern brought up about the 90. Okay, I'm not going to bring that. The antlerless elk. So if we have a problem in a CWMU where they're overpopulated, I feel like the division's done a really good job of giving tools to take care of that problem. And I think they've addressed that they will do all that they can to allow public to help take care of that problem as much as they can. So I do want to at least address that and say, like, not just put it aside. I feel like we're in a pretty good spot where they're at, where they have tools if they are overpopulated. Let's get rid of some of these elk that need to, that are possibly damaging habitat. I'd rather have someone take care of that than fight about who takes care of that. So offer it to the public as much as we can is fabulous and great, but let's take care of the problem.
That's a good point, Paula. The other end of that coin is that, as far as the CWMU operators, they don't have an out. Says, well, we just couldn't get the hunters because we're saying here's some tags. You go get the hunters and get it done. And so there's kind of on the other side of the coin there. They're required to get that harvest one way or the other, and hopefully with public hunters. But if there's just not enough of those, they've got to go out and get them too. And the reciprocal part of it, I think, is good too, because if this CWMU is where the elk are, but this one over here hasn't got it, his hunters can go over there and get them, but he still has to get them. He still has to get those. So I think the way that ended up with the antlerless harvest is a really good position for both the public and the private folks. So.
Like a motion.
All right. Any other discussion on CWMU? If not, I'll call for a motion.
I'll make a motion that we accept the balance of the CWMU as proposed by the division.
I'll second.
Got a motion by Gary to accept the balance of the CWMU rule amendments as presented, seconded by Paula. Let's start with Brett. Are you going to recuse yourself again?
Still recused, yeah.
Thank you.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. That's unanimous. Thank you. Thank you, Chad. And thank you for all the time you put in for this. I know it was a big deal. There's a lot of effort there. Next, we'll move to item number 8, Conservation Permit Program Rule Amendments. Covey? Oh, Covey, do you mind if we take a 5-minute break before you start?
I was set on going, but whatever.
Okay, thank you for saying yes. Let's take 5 minutes and we'll start again at right at 11 o'clock.
Salt Lake. Could you please bring us back in with a countdown?
Wildlife Board meeting, you're live in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Thank you. We're back to the Echoes Wildlife Education Center for the Wildlife Board meeting on June 13th, 2024. We're dealing with item number 9. Right now, conservation permit program rules is item number 8. Conservation permit program rule amendments. We'll turn the time over to Covey Jones, our wildlife section chief, for any update he wants to give us on that before we start our discussion.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I think a lot of this was in my presentation, but if it's okay with the board, just a quick summary of what the program is and how it came to be and some of what it's done, if that's okay. Okay, so the conservation permit program, it really started in the 80s with desert bighorn. And the history of desert bighorn in our state it's a pretty interesting one. At the time of settlement by the pioneers, it was the most prolific big game animal in the state. More desert bighorn sheep than deer, elk, moose. There were no moose, so that was easy to beat. But there were more more bighorn, not just desert bighorn, but more bighorn sheep than any other species. And because of several things, but unregulated hunting and disease transmission issues, by the time we hit the early 1900s, they were almost gone. Very few populations left. And the Wasatch, the last sheep there was like 1926. Justin's outsider, he could confirm that. And then as we hit about 1960, there's less than 100 left in a small pocket of Southeast Utah. By 1980, there was a group of passionate sportsmen that wanted to see bighorn sheep expanded and transplanted back into their native habitats. But there wasn't any money to do it. So it was proposed that we auction one tag for one bighorn ram, and we take those proceeds and start to transplant and reestablish bighorn sheep back across the state. So we did. It sold for about $20,000, and the program started from there. And when we saw the benefits that it could have for Utah's wildlife and expanding populations and helping with habitat restoration, just making the landscape better and being able to have more wildlife for all the residents of the city of Utah, it was expanded to all species. And that was in the 90s. And as of 2001, tracking from 2001 to today, the program has generated over $80 million to go back into Utah's habitat, Utah's wildlife, bolstering populations and making things better for everyone. It's a good program, and I feel like I've been asked about, the Utah, and we've said this on the record and we'll continue to say it on the record, is that we value the North American model for wildlife conservation, which means wildlife belongs to everyone, and it truly does. And we have several programs in the state, though, that I guess what I'm trying to say in saying this is that the North American model for wildlife conservation, they're good tenets, but they don't cover everything. They don't cover private property, for example, and private property rights. They don't cover a lot of what we do. And so at times, yes, we deviate from that model when it makes sense. And the conservation permit program is one of those times where it makes sense. It makes sense because we end up with more wildlife for all, and the revenue is used for all the citizens of the city of Utah. One more thing to mention, and I just lost my train of thought, so I guess I'll stop there, and if it comes back to me, it comes back to me. But with that, it did need some tweaks in the rule. There's some things that we needed to address. When we wrote a new elk plan, we changed the percentage of permits that we put in different seasons. And so we made a few tweaks there on recommended seasons to align more with the new elk plan. For deer, we made a few recommended changes to the draw order there to account for multi-season, which we have a multi-season permit in the draw. And so we wanted to reflect that in the conservation permit program. A few other minor changes that we proposed, just taking out the variance process for unit permits and establishing that sheep permits would go through the end of the year, which is a variance we used to always come and ask the board for. Allowing conservation groups at times when it makes sense to share an employee, where they can both fund that employee and share an employee. And then just some clarification and some cleanup to make it so that it follows the code change or the law change that happened as they recodified our code over the last year or so. That's all.
Thank you, Covey. Questions for Covey by the board?
So the type of permits that you offer, so there are some turkey or bear or whatever. So if they are if they're part of the permit list, they're allowed to receive money from the conservation. Is that why we have turkey in there and why we have?
Yeah,
How
that's a really good point. So the way the conservation permit program works is that if something is a conservation permit species, the funding can then be used on those species. Now, it doesn't have to be used like for species, like deer conservation permit money can't only be spent on deer. But deer conservation permit monies couldn't be spent on waterfowl, for example, because they're not a conservation permit species or on others. So the revenue generated on conservation permit species is spent back on conservation permit species. So bear, turkey, those animals. Yep.
Other questions for Covey? Questions by RAC chairs? No? Well, we do have some online public comments. We'll turn the time to Director Shirley for that.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Agenda item number 8, conservation permit program rule amendments. We had 8 submissions. 6 of those comments strongly or somewhat agreed with the division's proposal, and 2 strongly or somewhat disagreed. Again, generally supportive. The unsupportive comments would like to eliminate the in-person validation requirement at the expo on expo permits. Would like the division to consider at least 50% of these tags from an auction to some sort of public draw. And then 4 comments made, again, generally supportive of the program, but the way that those are allocated and the motion made by the Northeastern Region RAC. There were 4 comments in support of that. And then 1 comment speaking to the reduction of auction tags.
Thank you. We'll go to our RAC chairs for their RAC discussions and motions and votes. Brad?
Northern Region, we had a motion to accept the rule amendments as presented, and that passed unanimously.
Central Region, we had a motion to accept the rule amendment as written, and that passed unanimously.
Northeastern Region had quite a bit of discussion on this. They had 2 motions. First motion was to pass as presented, as the division presented, and passed unanimously. However, there was a second motion to have the Wildlife Board look at different ways to generate revenue from the current conservation permits to open more affordable avenues for the general public. The main concern with it was that the public are possibly losing out on some of these tags are going to be auctioned off, that type of deal. And they would just like the board to be able to look into it, to look at different avenues, maybe doing a raffle or some kind of a drawing for some of those permits instead of sending it to be auctioned off. And that was kind of their main concern.
And then that passed unanimous, is that also?
Yes, and that one passed unanimous as well.
Thank you. Kevin?
Yeah, the Southern Region voted to accept as presented, but with one exception, and that refers to the variance for to have hunts extended to December 31st, that where possible, if that's approved for the conservation permit hunter, it should be approved for the public hunter as well, where possible.
And was that passed unanimous also?
Yes, that was passed unanimous.
Thank you. Eric?
The Southeastern RAC unanimously approved a motion to accept the division's presentation as presented.
Thank you, Eric. Okay, we'll come back to the board. I don't believe we have any audience comments. Okay. So board discussion, I won't summarize those. Those are, I think, fairly easy. We've got, they were all unanimous with the Northeast wanting maybe a look at the way we do the conservation permits, and the Southern to move to make December 31st the end for their sheep hunts for not just conservation permit holders, but others. Okay, got that right. So back to the board for discussion. Let's two of the issues, I think. Well, let's talk about the one from the southern region first. The season date for sheep hunters. Let's talk about that one first, and then I think we need to talk about the one of the Northeast region hands. So let's talk about the southern region first.
Okay. One thing I'd like to give a shout out for the conservation permit program, just to begin with, and there's been a lot of public comment, and a lot of people, you can get your rings ready, Stacy. Okay. Anyway, the program, there's a lot of people that are concerned about losing permits, and there's like 300 and something permits that go into the program. I think it's good to realize also that a lot of stuff we have, the permits that are out there that are available, the things we want, the things this is wonderful. We have turkeys, we have Rocky Mountain Bighorn, we have Desert Bighorn, we have goats, we have expansion of moose opportunity, we have expansion of elk. All of this we have because of the program. Like if we didn't have that program, we wouldn't have Rocky Mountain Bighorn, we wouldn't have Desert Bighorn hunts, we wouldn't have goat hunts at all, period, without that program. So I think it's important to just point that out to start with.
Yeah, I think you can't. Great comment. Go ahead, Gary.
It's interesting because all of us that aren't rich guys have an anti-rich guy attitude, because they kind of get anything they want anytime they want it anyway, right? But I think in this case, to take a few permits and generate that kind of revenue for the good of all the wildlife, I think it's the best bang for the buck. The things we can do as far as producing more opportunity. I think that even though it initially lessens it for a few, I had Lindy run me some numbers, and then this is for this year. There were, if you look at the limited entry tags that we issue as a state, there's 5,480 of them, and 199 of those go to auction. Okay, so which is right around 4%. And then on the once in a lifetime, there's 426 once in a lifetimes that are issued through the state, and 32 of those go. So it's like I say, I realize it's a sacrifice to basically write off the general public for some of those, but I think with what's been happening with the revenue generated, that it'll in the long run it'll be by far the best idea. So I don't know, I like the program. I think we may want to put something maybe on there's people seem to be convinced based on what other states do that we could raise more money doing it some other way, even a public raffle, you got super tags in some states and stuff like that. But I don't know if you could, based on what I've observed with the conservation program. So.
Yeah, I concur with a lot of that. It is a great program, and a lot of money gets generated. I feel like if we're taking a resource, we should definitely be maximizing the amount of money that we can get from it. So as long as we're doing that, then I'm happy with that, and it's good. And I feel like right now we're probably doing that. Kobe, when you went to WAFWA, I imagine you talked to other states about this. What were you hearing, and what'd you learn from other states?
Yeah, so after the discussion, and I'll speak in generalities, and I got a lot of data from other states, but it holds true generalities. After the discussion in the Northeast region, I came back and I started to look at some comparisons and just dig into because this is one where it's about the revenue and it's about partnerships too, with conservation organizations, and both are really important. But after digging into the revenue generated in auction versus raffle, we have something similar here in Utah. I started with us, our sportsman's tag and governor's tag. And our sportsman's tags in our drawing generate about $500,000. And this is abouts, right? And then the auction governor's tags, it's about 1.1 to 1.2 million. And I compared that against other states that offer different types of drawings where you can put in multiple attempts and other things, New Mexico, and it's very similar in that their drawings generate about, it's usually about half of what their auction permits generate. The other thing is that I noticed after talking with other states is that their auction permits are usually somewhere between 5 and 10% of the total revenue cost to generate those funds, right? That's the cost to generate those funds. Whereas the drawings were anywhere from 20 to 35% the cost to generate those funds. So the revenue generated was lower, and then a big chunk of that went back to actually just marketing and everything they did to generate those funds and got backed out. So that was kind of eye-opening, and the trend held true for a lot of our surrounding states, all of them. There are a few rare exceptions where they can get folks really excited about a drawing one year and they'll have a bump that year, but then the next year it's right back down where it was. And there's not direct comparisons everywhere, because like Idaho has one auction tag and 40 special drawing tags. Well, and a lot of times those 40 special drawing tags would generate less revenue than the one auction tag. And so it's not perfect to evaluate every other state and what they do, but in terms of generalities, it just didn't generate as much revenue. Yeah.
Thank you for that explanation. That actually answers a question I was going to ask. I made a commitment to an individual that reached out to me that I would ask about that and ask the division if they'd looked at ways to do the conservation permit program differently that would generate the same amount of money. And you've answered the question that obviously there's not anything in place that will generate a similar amount of money and do the same thing. So thank you.
Corey, do we, you say there's another state does about 40 tags. I mean, we've got 300 and some tags we do. Do other states is there any other states that do as many tags as we do?
As many auction tags?
As many conservation tags?
No, not Western state anyways. We do the most. And what I would say is, we mentioned transplants, which is a big deal but we also are able to gather the most data. There is no other state that catches 1,800 big game animals a year. There's no other state that gets cause-specific mortality on hundreds of animals a year. And is really trying to address limiting factors, specifically in mule deer, to start to say, okay, we need to do this to grow here, and this to grow here, and this to grow here. And we show up at these meetings and they're like, we want to address this. Our sportsmen want these answers, but they can't get them. They can't fund that type of effort. So yes, we do more. And because of that, we do more, I guess is the answer. And I'm not saying that it's right. I'm not saying that the number's right or that it's right. It's calculator based. It's formula driven. It might not be the right number, but with that number, that's what we're able to do.
I think this is an awesome program too. This is it's done great things for our state over the last several years. But I think as the public, we're trusting you and the division to make sure we're getting as many conservation dollars for those tags that we can get. I guess so the expectation is if there's a different way to do it than auctions, through drawings or however, I think the expectation is that you guys do that, or at least look at it. And I don't know that we need to actually have a motion to do that, but I mean, because I think the expectation is you guys are just doing that, right? I mean, you're visiting with other states, see what they're doing and stuff. So I think the Northeast region, I think we need, that it was when there's an issue on the table from a region and it's unanimous, just like the 90% one, we need to address that. If it's an issue that's split 6-5, it's kind of different, but unanimous, we need to address it. So, I think through your travels and meetings with the other states, you see this stuff, and I guess what I'm hearing is we think we're doing it better, getting the best bang for our dollar, or the most dollars for our conservation tags that we can. Is that true?
We're generating more revenue per tag with this method. But that doesn't mean that we shouldn't keep looking. Like you said, Randy, I think anytime we do something like this, we want to make sure that we're doing the best we can for the public. And if it makes sense to do some of these permits differently, we can commit to continue to look at that and evaluate that, and make sure that this is the right way to do it. And one of the things that I've heard is maybe the permits that are worth less money that are in the program, the turkey tags or things like that, maybe we look at something else for those. But what I would say is that those are the types of permits that a lot of people can afford when they go to a banquet or support a banquet. And so it's kind of fun to see the average person be able to buy a permit or and so there's drawbacks and trade-offs with everything, and we're trying really hard to balance is what I'm trying to say. But yes, we do attempt to maximize this revenue, and we will continue to do that.
I know in the Northeast region, one of the members there offered a letter that had been drafted up by probably he and some others. I don't know that I didn't give you a copy of it. I know now I didn't give you a copy of it. Did you happen to get a copy elsewhere?
I saw a copy of it, and that's what led me to, because in theory, you can always say if we had this many people pay at this rate, and it depends on what state you're in and what the cost is. But there's theory if we had this, and then there's what's actually going on the ground, and they're doing this at this rate with as many attempts as you'd like. I mean, I've got one right. I've got an example right here if you allow me to give it to you.
Sure.
Okay, so this is New Mexico. So New Mexico puts exactly the same number of permits in their auction program as they do in their raffle. You can put in as many times as you'd like. It's $20 a exact same thing for their auction permits. On average, over the last 3 years, they've seen from $320,000 to $415,000 of revenue generated in their drawings. Of that, and that Bighorn makes about half that revenue for them. And of that, I think it's about 20%. Oh, the raffle administrative costs are 30%. So of that money they generate, they lose 30% right off the top to run their drawing. Those same exact permits at auction over the last 3 years generated between $600,000 and $724,000 with a 5% administrative overhead cost. And it's very similar to what we see in our sportsman's drawing versus our statewide permits. We generate, about half as much, and it costs more to run a drawing than it does to run an auction. So, and this is just one example from New Mexico, right? And not all states are the same, so comparisons across are hard, but the general theme was every time it will generate less revenue. I don't know that means that it's wrong, and we try to have a good mix. We have a couple special drawings in Utah. The sportsman's drawing is a special drawing, and then we also have the expo that's a special public drawing. Anybody can go there, anybody can put in, and it's another chance to obtain a tag for Utah's wildlife, which is a really cool opportunity. But even that, you know, funding generated by the expo, 200 permits set aside for the expo generates about $2 million, as opposed to the just over 300 permits set aside for the conservation permit program generates about $8 million. And so it just, it's different.
Yeah.
Not wrong, different.
Thank you for that, that demonstration from New Mexico. That, I think that helps a lot. I just want to make sure you had a copy of what the Northeast gave us.
Yes.
I brought a copy, but I know he sent me something late last night, said he changed the word in it. So I hadn't had a chance to print it yet. So I don't know that we need to, does anybody feel like we ought to have a motion on anything of this? Let's go to the December 31st thing on sheep. Do we need to, anybody feel like we need to?
Could you give me a little clarification on that, Kevin? What exactly they were looking at?
No, but Covey will, because he understands it a lot better than I do.
I think it's pretty simple. In the past, since we started to have bighorn sheep permits, the statewide permits always get through the 31st, but there was a clause in the rule that allowed for a variance for unit permits if we came and asked for it. And since the beginning, since before my time, before Justin's time, since the beginning, we've came and asked the board for that variance through the 31st for unit conservation permits. And this doesn't make sense. If we ask for a variance every time, it's really not a variance anymore. It really just is. So we made the rule change as an agency to reflect that, or are proposing the rule change is what I should say, to reflect that unit permits go through the 31st. And in the southern region, there was a little bit of concern that the what's good for the goose is good for the gander, and fair point. Why can't we have unit sheep permits go through that same time? And I believe the motion they made was they were supportive of it as long as the unit permit went through that date as well. Kevin, was that correct? Am I correct in assuming that?
Yeah, that was just an issue of fairness. Was what the discussion was.
Yeah,
about.
and that works because most of our sheep units are 100% until we have a sheep population that's bigger with multiple hunts. So you have, a couple hunts on the Newfoundland Mountains, a couple hunts on the Oak Creeks because it's small to not concentrate hunters around there and allow. And so you can't run every one of those hunts through the 31st or splitting out hunts. Just, it doesn't work well anymore. And there's probably a discrepancy there. And I understand. I don't know if there's a right answer there either, but that's the recommendation from us. And that's the rationale behind it. It would work on some units. It wouldn't work on all units.
Okay, thanks. I was just looking, to understand the correlation between that and the recommendation from the Southern RAC.
And from the Southern, they said where it makes sense. So there's quite a few units that have multiple hunts that it's not possible, but there are some units where it is possible. Do you have any heartburn with extending that? Although, we do have the governor's tag. It's an extended hunt. I mean, you can't really quite go back and forth on that. Do you have any concerns with the others going that far, or just?
I really don't. I don't want to speak for the big game program, and Rusty's not here, but Dax is today. But on most units, I don't know that it would be, if it's possible, I don't know that it would be a problem.
I like where we can, if it's possible to extend those. But we set dates for this year, obviously, so I don't think that's going to happen. But for the next go round, we can look at that when we look at season dates.
We can definitely look at that. Yeah.
So is that something we need to decide next round of season dates, not this one?
Yeah, I think it'd have to be for next year, but Is that something we need to ask the division to put on the action log, or is that something that they'll just take a peek at and see where it makes sense?
If it gets on the action log, we'll make sure and we'll see it. So
Okay. I'll entertain a motion to put it on the action log.
So moved.
Got that, Stacy? Do I have a second?
I second.
Second by Paula. Let's start with you down there, Kent.
Yes.
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 Motion carries. And I don't think there was any other items on this one outside of those two we discussed. Is there any other issues before we call for a motion for the entire rule change? Call for a motion for the conservation permit rule amendment.
I'll make a motion that we accept the balance of the proposal by the division.
I have a motion by Gary. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Kent. Let's start with you down there, Brett.
Yes.
Yes.
I'll recuse for my conservation organization involvement.
Yes.
All right, so we got, it carries with one recusal. Thank you. All right, Kobe, you're still on the hot seat up there for the conservation permit list. Item number 9.
all right, thank you, Mr. Chair. So this is just to go through the conservation permit list really quickly. Big green button, right? All right. All right, I already went through this, the quick overview of the program and what it is, the revenue that's generated, how it got started. It's been a good program for wildlife. Some of the things the funds are used for, right, is we're able to install a lot of guzzlers, have more big game captures and more data than a lot of our surrounding states, if not all of our surrounding states. It's really what got the Utah Migration Initiative off the ground and got us some really cool, unique tools like Wildlife Tracker. We're able to integrate with planning efforts and show how wildlife use the landscape. And it's key to our restoration program. If this is the seed money, this is the money that matches that to get things off the ground, and it really gets a program where we spend between 35 and 45 million a year on habitat, which is pretty cool. And this is the stuff that starts it. Conservation permits. This rule is probably the most detailed rule we have as far as here's how you're going to do it. Here's how you're going to administer it. Here's when something gets a permit. Here's when it doesn't. And it is very nailed down. So when we make these recommendations today, these recommendations are all made as per rule. Conservation permits. A unit does not get a conservation permit until it hits 11 permits. At 11 permits, it can have one. And then every 20 permits after that, it gets another one until it hits 8. And at 8, regardless of how many more permits, how many more public permits it has, it can't have more than that. So the Wasatch Elk unit at times has had over 900 permits. It still only has 8 conservation permits. Just as an example for deer, and this says proposed because it was proposed when I made this. This is one of the things we changed in the rule. But if a unit had enough public permits to have 8 conservation permits, here's the order then that they would be distributed to the conservation organizations through the conservation permit draft. You'd start with the first permit for that unit would be a multi-season, then a hunter's choice, a muzzleloader, archery, then multi-season, hunter's choice, muzzleloader, and archery, repeating again. To go through some of the process, conservation permits are approved in the spring. I guess we're still spring. We got a few days. They're approved only on a 3-year cycle. So this approval's for the next 3 years. Conservation organizations, they're applying. A lot of them are applying now, And there are certain requirements. All those requirements to be a conservation organization are outlined in rule. And really, anybody can apply for this program that meets those requirements. After applications are taken and permits are set, then the permit draft takes place. So, Randy, you said whenever we do something like this with a public resource, we better make sure that we're getting the most value for what we're giving, right? And sorry, Mr. Chair, but and when we do that, the draft and the way this is administered really holds the groups to this. So as an example, each permit is given a value, right? It's given a value, and then your past performance dictates the amount of market share you have to then obtain that permit. And you're compared not only against yourself and that permit, but you're also compared against the other groups to see what they did with that permit or similar permits. So you're also required to maintain a certain percent of market share as a group, especially your first 3 years, right? If you don't maintain 75% of market share, you cannot continue as a conservation permit group. And so if you obtain permits that are evaluated at $100 and you show your sales history of those permits drop to $75, that doesn't work. Or the other thing is, you're also, if everybody else takes that permit and increases the market share to $120 or $125, that's the new standard that you're held to. And so that's one of the ways that we make sure that we're getting the most value out of these, is by having a very competitive process that pushes the groups to do the best they can to market these permits. After the draft takes place of all the permits and they're disseminated to the groups, then the DWR will notify the board of the conservation permit results. We don't allocate these to every limited entry hunt across the state. This program started with the traditional limited entry hunts, is what I would say, and we've maintained that through time, where it's the traditional limited entry units. So some of these late season limited entry muzzleloader hunts, some of these hams hunts, some of these, we don't allocate conservation permits to those, or haven't. Here is the list that we're asking for approval on. You'll notice there is an increase from last time. And again, this is completely based on public permits. So when we went through the process last time, it was actually a decrease of, I believe, about exactly the same. It was a decrease from it was in the 330s down to 318 because we were issuing fewer elk permits. With the change in the elk plan and the pronghorn plans, we're offering more elk permits and pronghorn permits, and that's the majority of the increase, is where there's more public opportunity, we're offering more conservation permits. And so we're asking, as per rule, an increase of 18 permits. And that's all I have. The rest is in the hunt tables.
Thank you, Covey. Appreciate you explaining a little bit about the program to us too, and especially when it got started years ago and how it's developed into what it is today. What a great program it is. Okay, questions for Covey? I'm not hearing any. This was not an action item went to the racks, right? Yeah, this is just us.
Yeah, this is board only.
So we won't ask the rack chairs for their motions or their other stuff or questions either. Any questions from rack chairs? Okay. And I don't believe we had any online comments. All right. So board discussion. Anybody have any concerns raising those permits by 18? I think is what it was. Good reason for it.
I'd make a motion to approve as presented.
Okay, Kent has a motion to approve as presented. Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Second by Brett. Let's start on your end, Kent.
Yes.
Recuse.
Yes.
Yes.
Motion carries with one recusal. Thank you, Paula. All right.
Thank
I think
you.
that was the last item on our agenda today. So do I have a motion to adjourn? Oh,
Had a chance to go and participate and talk with other commissioners from other states, and I've had a chance to do that a few times, and every time I do that, I come away with a sense of gratitude for where I live and what we have going on. You know, look at the division people, and ours are exceptional. They're good pretty much everywhere, but as far as the opportunity to make something happen, we have stuff happening here that's not happening anywhere. Other states are jealous. They use our data to help them manage their game populations, hoping it's similar enough that it'll help, but we're the only ones that have the actual one. But I did also have a chance to go to the mule deer meeting yesterday, and I have something I'd like to put on the action list. It's just been talked about quite a bit over the years about dedicated hunter hours and stuff and how to get those, how to use them. You know, we've done some messing around with hour requirements. I know we've lowered them a little for the first year. I would like to put it on the action list to explore the possibility of being able to do dedicated hours and bank them for a year. Like a lot of the projects, I know there's opportunities for projects that happen prior to the draws. And so if people wanted to participate in those, they could count for that year's draw if they should happen to draw. I'd like to have them take a look at the possibility of doing that instead of scrambling to find something to do between when you draw and when the hunts start. And it doesn't seem like, you know, before I know it was a paperwork nightmare, but where it's all online now, it shouldn't be much of a nightmare at all to keep track of that. You know, a couple of button clicks would handle it, but I'd like to put that on the action log. Make a motion that we do.
You're talking about just going back 1 year though?
Yeah, 1 year's enough. It's not, I mean, it's not like, it's not an actual bank account. It's just if you do hours within the year of the year that you draw, they can count for that year, is what I'm thinking.
I'll second it. I can get behind that.
So just to clarify, sorry, Andy, if they do a project in January, it would count, but if they do a project December the year before, it would not count. Is that
True.
what we're saying?
Yeah, well,
I just want to make sure we got the dates set
We'd
right.
have to have some way to kind of cut it off, but
Yeah.
yeah, that's, if they do it within the year that they actually finally get a dedicated hunter tag, it'll count. Because
Okay,
it's
I'm on
taken
board
3 or
with that.
4 years now to get them. And most of the guys I know that would be doing these are doing them anyway. It's not just like throwing them a bone for being a good guy.
so if I understand, the motion is to have the division look into doing this, right? To come back with us with a proposal, if it makes sense to how they could do it.
Yes.
Okay.
I'll second that.
All right. We got a motion and a second. I'll start with you, Brett.
Yes.
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 Motion carries. Very good. Now, anything else? All right, now we'll call for a motion to adjourn.
I move we adjourn.
Motion by Brett,
Second.
second by Kent. All in favor, raise your hand. Very good. Thank you. Appreciate everybody today and rack chairs and division employees and everyone that's been here today. Appreciate you traveling and all that you do for us. Thank you.